Good morning, Warzone kids. Back for part 2. Is it a logos or a mythos? Mu, M-U, is not the answer to my favorite knock-knock joke of what did the interrupting cow say, but it is a word, M-U, which comes out of the Zen world, and it's the answer to a famous koan, or like puzzle, of does the dog have Buddha nature? And mu is kind of just means like, based on what I can figure out, mu is something not quite no, not quite, it makes no difference. Like in German, you might say macht nix. It makes no difference. Mu does not mean that. It doesn't mean no. It kind of means like if there was a, it kind of means like negation, negatory, nihil, something like that. Nothing. It's a void. It's a negatory void, something like that. When people tell me that I have a tendency to be cerebral, this is probably the kind of stuff they're talking about, but this is really interesting to me. So I think that Dogen is not writing a logos or a mythos. I think he's writing something else. And I gotta like briefly, discuss my understanding of this, Buddhist concept, of this Zen concept in the Heart Sutra of skandhas. And like a lot of these words, it's translated as, the translation doesn't help you any more than the word. You're better off in many cases just sticking with the concept. The problem with translation is words stand in for concepts and thoughts, and when you're going across the cultural divide, you can't wrap your mind around how many cultural assumptions you bring with you when you translate something. I mean, that's why translators drive themselves bananas on the simplest things. It's just, you say, well, just give a literal translation, whatever that might mean. You can't do it. The words are concepts, and concepts arise from a specific location, time, space, and culture, and all that. So skandha, they'll translate it as aggregates. I'm a Zen practitioner. Let me be very clear. I'm not a scholar or a teacher of Zen or anything else of Zen beyond a practitioner and a reader of stuff. But I've been a reader of stuff for a long time, and I feel like it, I bring a lot of reading experience to bear. And, I have made my way from, beginning to end of numerous arduous philosophical works, many of whom were not worth the effort. But you had to read it, you had to put out the effort to learn that, so you take something from it anyway. Wax on, wax off. But the skandhas are aggregates and the collections, and you can think of it as silos, groupings, something like that. And it may even have to do with this kind of tree called Bodhi trees, which send on these roots from the branches. You got an original root that grows up, and then you got branches, and then the branches send roots down into the soil, and then those roots will grow into trunks of their own. And so the concept of skandha seems like it's probably related to that kind of image. You can have a Bodhi tree that occupies acres of forest, and it's a single tree because of all these aggregates of roots that grow down. But it's all one tree, but these are aggregates of it. These are skandhas of that tree. I believe that kind of image, if you hold it in your mind, will get you a lot closer to what the concept is getting at than the word aggregates. But whatever, poor translators. And the skandhas comes into play because in the Heart Sutra, a lovely short little scripture that forms the heart of Zen. You just leave it at that. Who cares? There's reference to the 5 skandhas, as these 5 skandhas are this skandha of skandhas. The phrase the 5 skandhas is itself an aggregate of skandhas. The skandhas are like all the stuff that makes up what goes on in here. The skandhas of human experience. And these are shapes, things that we see, forms, perceptions, feelings, mental formations, and consciousness. And you can see a sort of that these are in some kind of order, you might say. And don't make it harder than it has to be. Forms are just the stuff that you see in the world, the shapes. How do I know that something's a distinct shape? I can see the outlines of it. I can see the color. It's a form. It has a form. And then you perceive, perception. I see that shape. I know it is a road. The road in front of me is a form. The thing in front of me is a form. I perceive it as a road. I have that perception then leads to feelings. I feel that I'm on the road. I have a feeling of happiness. I'm driving on the road. I'm driving on an interstate, not a Class D unimproved cow path in Vermont. It has been plowed. Gives me a happy feeling. And then form, perception, feeling, mental formations. My thoughts about the road, my concepts. Mental formations is one. They'll translate that in all kinds of ways, but I'm just going to leave it as mental formations. This lay Zen practitioner, I can't stress how much I'm just a guy that does Zazen and goes to a Zendo from time to time and takes it seriously, but at that level. Mental formations. I'm on Interstate 89. It's part of the Interstate 89 is part of the Eisenhower interstate system, created after World War II. That's a mental formation about the road that I'm on. So there's a fine case. A form of the gray, black, snow, ice encrusted thing in front of me led to the perception of a road and the feeling of happiness that it's a nice, wide interstate, and knowledge that that interstate got here in a certain kind of way because it's part of the Eisenhower interstate system, right? And all that is happening in my consciousness. There. 5 skandhas, and you can kind of see. Well, they've got this line. So the idea there is that all that, if there's something happening in your head, it's one of those, it's whatever it is one of those skandhas. There's not things that happen in your head outside those skandhas. That's what I take the Heart Sutra. That's what I take the concept of skandhas to mean. And the relevance of it. And it comes up in the Heart Sutra because the realization that the fella narrating the Heart Sutra, Avalokiteshvara, had is that all those skandhas are empty. We're gonna, don't worry too much. In fact, I'm fixing to wrap this up, and we'll take it up in part 3. Forms are emptiness. Emptiness is form. They go heavily into that. And to give just the executive summary of what that means to me at the moment, that there's nothing else added to any of these things except what they are. The form I see in front of me is this ribbon-like shape and color and texture of a road. That's a highway that's part of the interstate highway system. That's what it is. There's not other things added to it. I mean, it's not silly. The road is just a road. When people say something like that, the road in front of you is just the road in front of you. Emptiness is the concept that they're evoking here, and don't worry about that too much. Again, it's like something that would come to mean something to you as a practitioner. But that's the concept of emptiness. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. There's not an essential nature of this road. There's not an essence of this road. There's not the spirit that resides in this road. This road is not a deity. This road is nothing but a road. It's just a road. It's a shape, and that goes through this progression in my mind. But the thing in front of me is just the thing in front of me. And in the Heart Sutra, it goes on to say, forms are emptiness, emptiness is form. Okay. And thus it is with all the other skandhas: perception, feelings, mental formations, and consciousness. These are all empty. What does it mean? I mean, there's nothing added to those things except for those things. In a feeling, the sun is in my eyes, pilgrims. When you have a feeling, there's nothing to that feeling except that feeling. That feeling doesn't mean other things. The feeling of anger is just the feeling of anger. That's what I'm not trying to give a lesson on this beyond an example of, that's what it seems like the use of the word empty has to mean in this kind of context. Empty. Feeling is a feeling. A perception is just a perception. There's not something extra added to it. A fine example is, you remember a few years ago on the web, there was a thing about, is this dress green and gold, or is it gold and white, or is it green and yellow, or something like that? Do you remember this? What's the true answer? That's a fine example, I think, of the idea of a perception as being empty. The perception of that dress is that it was either green and gold or white and yellow. If I say that 5 times, I'll probably mix up the colors 5 different ways. See, that's it. That perception is empty. There's not a true answer to that. It's a perception. Well, did you see a green and gold dress or a yellow and white one? That's what it was. There's not a true answer to that. There's not something extra called truth that's added to that. It's just a perception of a dress, which might bring about the feeling of aggravation. But that's an emptiness, you see. That's what emptiness means to me in that. And I'll bring this to a close, take it up in part 3. Logos? Mythos? Moo! Take it easy, pilgrim. Get back to it. We had long enough of a break. We got a lot more miles. We can walk them together.